Hello, Jonny Long here. Clearly you are somewhat enjoying this podcast, otherwise you wouldn't be listening. The simple proposition is if you like something and want it to stick around, please consider paying for it. And the only reason this all exists is because people are paying for it, but we need all of you. We know you're out there listening to this for free, and that's fine because we're good, honest people, and we're not scraping your data to find out where you live and knocking on your door with a bucket demanding you chuck a tenner in. Instead, we're supposed to give you value propositions or to tug on your heartstrings to make you sign up, like we're those poorly animals from the daytime TV adverts. I'm going to make my pitch simpler. Pay for the things you enjoy, otherwise there's the risk they disappear. Media is a tough business, and while we've made a great start, there's still a long way to go. Consider what these podcasts and the rest of our media is worth to you, and hopefully that amount is above zero, ideally. So, if you regularly listen to these podcasts and are not yet a member, please strongly consider signing up so that we can continue making these podcasts and all the other articles and media you enjoy. Go to escapecollective.com/member to sign up, and thanks so much if you already have.
Welcome back to the Placeholder Podcast, everybody. I'm Caley Fretz. Joining me today, Kit Nicholson. Welcome back to the show.
Joe.
And Jonny Long.
Hello. We're ready.
You're looking a little orange.
I know. It's either, that's what happens if I have Wi-Fi. I suddenly take on a sort of Trumpian hue. So the choice is out there. It's binary.
Well, friends, we are 18 days as of recording away from the 2024 Tour de France, which is an exciting thing. And I think that's really this week, next week, for the foreseeable future, that's going to be a lot of what we're talking about, right? In particular, because this week, we not only have Tour de Suisse on right now, we have the Dauphiné, which just wrapped up. And the Dauphiné, as you wrote over the weekend, Kit, it helped to answer a lot of questions. So that's where we're going to start in this week's show. We're going to do a little Tour de France heat check. What we mean by that is, let's take a look at some of the contenders who were either at the Dauphiné or at Suisse this week, kind of run through them and see if we have answered any of the questions that we had before the Dauphiné. So let's kick off. Pop quiz, Kit. Who won the Dauphiné?
Roglic.
Good answer.
Well done to him. It wasn't as commanding as he might have maybe hoped, and that brings a good question, I think, which is, how do we kind of parse form this far out from the Tour?
Well, it's an interesting question because when you, especially in the aftermath of the Dauphiné, especially when you're comparing the riders who we expect to be in the picture, some of them are coming back from injury, and so they're acceptably not at their best yet. But then there are others like Roglic who we expect to be somewhat close to his best, and he was looking very dominant in the Dauphiné. But the fact that he did lose time on the final day means that suddenly he's not on form. But they've all got the same amount of time between now and the and the Tour. So yeah, I guess it's just, I think I was trying to work this out at the weekend when I was trying to do some analysis. It's just, there's a difference between, this rider is showing signs of their injury still, or this rider is being, sensible and measuring their efforts and looking like they're on the way back, as opposed to groveling at the back of the peloton, and looking like they're, on a training ride with some pros that they've never ridden before. It's I don't know. So I think, it's probably also worth noting that although Roglic did crash in that Basque crash, where everyone crashed for the Tour, but Roglic it was more superficial for Roglic. And I'm not saying, sure, it hurt a lot, and that crash wasn't his first crash of that week, and he crashed on stage 5 of the Dauphiné. This is a guy who was battered and bruised. So yeah, I mean, it's about as clear who's on form, or how you decide what form means at this point, as the waffle that I've just laid upon my colleagues here.
Roglic must have as many crashes as he does professional victories by this point now. And he's got a ton of both, which makes it more impressive.
I was going to say, I would wager that most professional bike riders have more crashes than professional victories. I think it would actually be pretty rare to go in the opposite direction. So Roglic won the Dauphiné. Right behind him were two riders that I don't think we necessarily would have selected for a podium, right? Ahead of the race. We have hashtag...
I would argue that that's not actually not 100% accurate, but carry on.
What do you think? Jorgensen was a
Yeah, I think he was a
predictable.
contender. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah, I
because
mean,
you
Visma
listen to
did come in.
placeholders with Dane and Caley.
Well,
on
it's
it.
also because he was one of the only ones in the top 10 or in the contenders before the race who hadn't crashed.
Yeah.
He's the only one who's been having a good season, almost without fail. Because Ayuso and anybody else who was expected to do well at the Dauphiné also crashed at the Basque Country or elsewhere. So I think Jorgensen, having won Paris-Nice.
Very
Anyway,
good
sorry,
at one-week
Caley, I
stage
interrupted
races.
you.
Very good at one-week stage races. Yeah. So my point here was that there's this sort of funny intersection of sort of form timing that happens at the Dauphiné, right? Where the real top Tour de France contenders, the guys who think that they can win the Tour, so I would put Roglic in that category, don't necessarily want to be 100%. That doesn't mean that they don't win the race, right? Like Roglic did win the race back in the day. You know, we had Wiggins and Froome winning the Dauphiné over and over again, and then also going on and winning the Tour de France. Generally, if you are that sort of dominant rider at the Tour, you can win the Dauphiné at 95%. But the other side of that coin is riders maybe more in the Derek G kind of category who put a little bit more emphasis on the Dauphiné because the chance of him getting an incredible result at the Dauphiné was higher than at the Tour de France, right?
Ciccone too.
Ciccone is exactly the same. So you're watching these climbs, and you've got Roglic, who is, you know, in theory a real contender for the yellow jersey, with like Ciccone next to him, right? And you're looking at it and going, well, that's not a great sign for Roglic, but it's actually maybe not the worst sign for Roglic because, like I said, I think they probably are timing themselves very slightly differently, or at the very least have sort of varying levels of motivation around this particular race. I mean, Derek G, the ride he had at the Dauphiné was in a lot of ways kind of career defining, right? I mean, this is a guy who's had piles of second places at Grand Tours. That was huge for him. It was absolutely massive for him, right? And would have been, you know, the exact same results, less so for Primož Roglic. So you have this kind of funny intersection of motivation and form and timing and all these things, and it makes it really, really difficult to parse exactly what it means going forward.
You know, the motivation is a big thing. What do they want to get out of the race? Because until stage 8, it was very much Bora Hansgrohe's opportunity to practice what they wanted to do next month or at the end of this month. You know, Vlasov was the last man standing for Roglic, dragged him all the way under the Flamme Rouge, and then let Roglic go. Roglic didn't take any without the time trial. He would have been something like 5th, I believe. Went all out where he needed to which means in the time trial and in the last, well, probably 500, 600 meters. Could he have taken more time? Who knows? Definitely after stage 8, it's hard to know. But he didn't need to take buckets of time out. He needed to practice with his team to see what they could do. You know, it's a new lineup for Roglic, and they had 7 out of 8 of the riders that they're taking to the Tour de France, and they were the only team to do that and not split them across multiple races.
Is Derek G a GC contender?
Stop
Not
it.
yet.
Stop it.
Yeah, there were lots of comparisons to Geraint Thomas, weren't there? But not this year.
I mean, back into Canadian Corner, because it's one of our favorite corners. There was, you know, we had hashtag GC Coos at the Vuelta last year, right? There was a fair amount of hashtag GC, which is fun. I like that. I like that one coming out of the Dauphiné. I think it's totally reasonable that he should certainly be shooting for a top 10.
Yeah.
I think at the Tour de France this year. I think it is a, barring Mr. Pogacar and the question marks over Vingegaard, it's a super open top 10 at this point, right? You've got piles of guys that can all sort of fit in there, and I think he should probably be looking at it. Did we learn anything about Remco Evenepoel?
He was telling the truth.
Didn't look
I
good.
think obviously he was telling the truth. Yeah. He was very good in the time trial. I mean, Josh Tarling was second off the ramp, and for most of the afternoon, nobody could come within 2.5 minutes of him, it seemed. But yeah, so Evenepoel, he said he was targeting the time trial, and obviously he was, and it went well. He beat Tarling by 17 seconds. It wasn't really a Tarling course. You know, when he won the Europeans, it was pan flat, and he's a big guy. Although he did then climb incredibly well over the weekend. But still, Evenepoel, yeah, he would regularly drop off the back in the Alps, something like 7K, or at least in the last 7 to 8K, there would be a point at which he would just pull the pin, basically. It's not that he didn't try, because obviously he's trying to test his form, but he knew that he wasn't a contender, so he knows himself. I think, you know, he's a scientific racer. So yeah, I think Evenepoel came out looking pretty good from the Dauphiné. Yeah, he only finished 7th. It wasn't the kind of big fight that some people might have hoped for, But I think he came out looking quite good.
It's just hard to read so much into it, I think. Like Roglic, I think the only reason he goes out and wins it this year is I think he's probably just nervous. I think he's got a whole new team figuring that out. He's got to go up against two guys that he's raced for years of the Tour, and he knows this is probably his last shot. Whereas if Remco's coming in a bit undercooked from his crash and the recovery and his haircut at the minute, which one reader pointed out, someone's absolutely gone nuts on his hairline, which is bad. But like it's not all or nothing for Evenepoel, is it? You know, he's proven everything. He's not. I would say he's not considered up there with the other three because he's never.
No,
this is his first tour.
I don't think he does either.
No, and I think Roglic. I think that's done a lot for him there. Like we've all separately been watching the Unchained documentary this morning, and Ben O'Connor, he came third at last year's Dauphiné before the tour, and he was saying like that
2 years
gave him
running,
so much confidence to show that he could like hang in there with Vingo or whatever on the climb. And sometimes these guys need that, you know. You're not going in there with as a Pogacar or Vingo where you're like, oh, I know I'm so much better. Like that's why they just turn up
100%.
because they know it.
He was seventh, though. I mean, seventh. Like, he was 220. So I'm talking about Evenepoel here. He was 225 back. He was behind riders like, I mean, he was behind two Ineos Grenadiers riders, neither of whom are necessarily GC contenders next month, right? I mean, Carlos Rodriguez, maybe. Maybe. I still see him probably going for a stage here, there, and maybe. I
think Rodriguez is more likely. This is maybe something for later in the conversation, but Rodriguez has got more of a shot at being up there than GC than Pidcock does.
Yeah,
oh, for sure,
top five
for sure. Although we'll talk.
But Deplouse is super domestique. He was very, very good. Incredibly.
I mean, so was Vlasov, right? Vlasov was playing super domestique the entire week. You know, he's basically almost in the same time as Giulio Ciccone, which, you know, Ciccone is a very, very good rider, but he's not even like one of Trek's real GC guys, right? Like, so if I'm Evenepoel, I'm not coming out of that with a ton of confidence, right? I'm coming out of that with I need another 5%, or this is not going to go. This Tour de France is not going to go the way that I'm hoping. That said, like, you know, the TT was super impressive. So to continue moving down the line here, when we're doing a little Tour de France heat check. So heat check on the biggest Tour de France team of the last 2 years. Visma Leasebike.
Oh, you got to feel sorry for them.
You got to feel a bit sorry for them. There was somebody in Discord who, I apologize, I now forget who posted this, but they were basically asking the question whether this was some sort of like karmic response to the last 2 years. Well, like
Richard Plugger had made a deal with the devil, and
exactly.
Now it's payback time.
Yeah, well, like what was there a deal made at some point, and now they're getting the other side of that deal, because it's been pretty rough, right? Like even at the Dauphiné, you had Sepp Kuss, who came in as sort of co-leader, the two American guys, right? Came in as co-leader with Matteo Jorgensen, and Sepp got sick, right? So like,
and they lost Kruijswijk and Van Baarle, who are incredibly important riders for the Tour.
Yes, so it just looks tougher and tougher for those guys. I think we're still working off the assumption that Jonas Vingegaard is going to be pretty good. Maybe not win the thing, but pretty good. I think I put him in second place overall in my little pick at the end of last week's show. If we just sort of ignore that, though, they came into this Dauphiné with Jorgensen and Kuss. Is that in any way a viable path into the Tour this year? Like, let's say Vingegaard's not doing well. Is that a viable path into the Tour?
For
they
you,
have a choice.
You'll be very excited.
That's true. I would love it. Yeah, fly Eagles fly.
I think Jorgensen if there's anybody who's confident at the moment, it's Jorgensen. Although, interestingly, he said that on Sunday, there was a little bit of a question mark over why he didn't try and win the stage and get extra bonus points. But in the end, it wouldn't have mattered because he lost, well, he was 8 seconds down. So he would only have been 4 seconds down in the end. But apparently he was partly just scared of G. He didn't want to bury himself and then G to go over the top of him and him to lose time.
Yeah.
But still, you know, Jorgensen is with a new team. I'm not sure you can still say that 6 months into the year, almost 6 months into the year. But still, he's with a new environment, and it's obviously working for him. He's won Paris-Nice and Vlaanderen. He's quite a big guy, but so is Geraint Thomas.
Yeah, but like you look at his shoulders are like 6 inches wider than Geraint Thomas's shoulders. Yeah. Like they're both tall, but I think Jorgensen probably has 5-10 kilos on Geraint Thomas.
Corn fed.
Like there was one point, and granted, Roglic is not a massive human being, but there was one point. There's a photo. I think we actually ran it as a feature image on the site over the weekend where Roglic is kind of looking back at Jorgensen, and Jorgensen's just giving him this like death glare, and also looks to be about twice his size, and he's like, "I dare you, buddy. I dare you." Like it's seriously impressive given the difference in body type. I do think that that's one of the differences between a 1 week stage race and a Grand Tour, right? Is that those bigger riders, they do tend to have a more difficult time in 3 weeks because it's all about total energy expenditure, right? So like every single little tiny climb that they go up, Jorgensen is doing more watts than Pogacar and Vingegaard, right? Or any of the other real GC contenders. So I do think that, Jorgensen would struggle to maintain that level, the sort of like dropping Roglic level going into the Tour de France, but it is certainly massively impressive what he's done already this year.
Thing is, if we're talking about a race for second, if we're figuring that Vingegaard is not going to be in contention in this hypothetical scenario, if you think about the people that you could see going onto the podium, most of them are in Pogacar's team.
Yeah.
Yates, Ayuso potentially. I mean,
a lot of them have crashed in the past week as well.
What?
It's true. That's true.
Yeah.
Like UAE all crashed at the Dauphiné as well. There was like six of their riders
everyone
all went
crashed
down.
at Dauphiné.
I mean, in that one big crash on the rainy day, like pretty much everybody fell down. So
yeah, Ayuso was one of the only GC riders to, if not the only GC rider to have to go home. Besides Kuss, but he wasn't in the picture at that point. Ayuso was up there.
I just
think
enjoy.
Jorgensen could do a high fit, could finish high, but we're talking a race that I don't know. I think if you put him against Evenepoel, Evenepoel's got the edge in the time trial, but I couldn't tell you who would win there, and I might lean towards Jorgensen based on this past week or so.
I just think it's great how it shows how held back he was at Movistar, where he had to like not only buy everything but do everything himself. Like it's incredible that those levels exist within the World Tour. It's the same with Christophe Laporte when he was at Cofidis and could only really finish fourth or second in any like reasonable sized race just because of what he had available to him. So like I sit here and listen to all this Jorgensen hype off the Dauphiné, and I'm a bit skeptical. But then also I think once you've had to deal with like a Movistar for however many years and you get your chance at Visma bike, especially when there's like half of the team missing, you're like, well, you know what? Things have been going quite well. This is like, I might as well try because who knows, I'll be back at Movistar in a couple of years' time and everything will be terrible again.
The bar's quite low as well for results at Visma bike. It's awful to say, but he's only got to finish top 5. If Vingegaard's not there, he's only got to finish top 5 for it to be, a
top
big
10
sigh of relief for them.
Top 10
for
Jorgensen would be unbelievable.
It'd be massive. It'll be massive.
Be huge.
Well, he's
It's
never
so
raced a Grand Tour for himself before, has he?
I mean, here's my little prediction for Jorgensen. Because I like, barring Sepp being sick, Sepp is a better Tour de France rider, right? Particularly, so look at the last, and we're not going to do a full Tour preview this show. We will do it as we get closer to the race. But the last week of the Tour this year is 4 mountaintop finishes and then a mountain time trial. So you could see Jorgensen being like 4th coming out of the second rest day, and then finishing the race like 9th, right? Yeah. Because that's when things are going to hit the fan, and that's when the minutes are going to get just minutes bled at the end of that week.
He's only ever raced three Grand Tours, and he didn't finish the third one, which was last year's Tour de France. He came 20th in 2022, but he wasn't racing for himself. So it's we're not even talking just going for GC. He's got to race a Grand Tour.
Oh, he's not
done a full Grand Tour since summer 2022
against Mike Woods.
Was that. Yeah, that sounds caught. Right.
I think that was it. Oh, I'm just excited. Like, this is why we can do another podcast about the Tour de France like 2 weeks out from any actual, or 2.5 weeks out from any racing. It's just
better than talking about the Tour de Suisse.
But the thing is because we don't usually have this many, like, not only contenders, but also so many unknowns going into it. Do you remember the years when it'd be like, oh, is Roman Bardet or Nairo Quintana going to beat Chris Froome? It's just like, how did everyone live back then?
It was rough, doing? I'll tell you. It was rough. Yeah. Let's move on to the Tour de Suisse. Can we take? We're only a little ways the way through the race. We haven't actually had any big mountain stages yet as of recording, so we can't take a ton of the Tour de Suisse yet. But any sort of glimmers of anything that you guys have noticed as we do our heat check here?
Yeah,
glimmers of anything.
Nairo Quintana's back on the Nairo Quintana's back on the painkillers because he broke his hand in a fall.
Oof.
So he's DNF'd. So that's not great for him.
No.
Who else crashed? Someone else crashed.
Although broken
Bookman.
hand, he'd probably still turn up at the Tour if he wants to.
Yeah, it just needs to.
Depends.
Yeah.
Ethan Hayter crashed. I'm not sure who else has crashed.
He's all right,
in
though.
the Tour de
He's
Suisse.
all right. Bookman's
Yeah, I
broken
don't think
his
there's much we can say
collarbone.
yet, apart from who's there.
And, I mean, yeah.
We were looking at the start list and we were like, ooh, Tour de Suisse Cav Watch. We could do a bit of Cav Watch in
Is
the
he
Tour de Suisse.
there?
But
He is there, but today's the last. It's a training. He's treating it as a training camp.
Yeah, so then you look at the actual stages and you're like, oh, there's like not a single actual real sprint stage the entire week. So probably not real much all that much Cav Watch. But what he does need and what he said is that he needed just like climbing time, right? He just needed to go be in a fast peloton climbing up big mountains ahead of the Tour because like let's not forget that for these sprinters, time cut is half the battle, if not more than half the battle,
brutal.
right? I mean,
Especially these days.
we lose a couple of them. Yeah, we lose a couple of them every single race, and without the sort of pretty chill first 100K that we used to get at the Tour, like when it's full gas from the first climb, oof, those sprinters have a rough go of it. So I think that that's why Cav is there. There's not really
And interestingly,
much
the
Cav watch to
whole
be done.
sprint train is there too. Case Ball, Mikhail Morkov, I think, is it Gleb Syriza is another one on the sprint train. Yep. So the whole sprint lineup's there to just get some mountains in their legs, which is quite interesting. Today's the last chance, and they've just gone under the Flamme Rouge. It's an 800-meter ramp of 7.5%.
Oh, so it's
not going to be a Cav day.
I think Cav will have just been like, I'm not going there to ride up mountains and have a horrible time if the rest of the big boys aren't coming with me. I think he wants them to understand his pain.
Well, I mean, yeah, you say that tongue in cheek, but it's also a bit like the Bora Hansgrohe thing at Criterium du Dauphiné. They're about to spend, as long as they don't crash, they're about to spend a month together, and they've got to reacquaint themselves with that sort of mutual respect, the mutual motivation, the goals that they want to set. So to actually spend this time together is, it's racing, is going through the motions, it's getting familiar with each other again, because they will be living on top of each other for the next probably 5 or 6 weeks.
You mentioned earlier, Jonny, that Unchained was released. It was released Tuesday the 11th. So anybody who has a Netflix account, go out and watch it right now. By the time this podcast lands, it's available everywhere. We need a quick plug here, which is that we're doing our Unchained binge watch podcast once again. Unchained Melody once again this year. So we are, we'll sort of drop these every couple days, sort of over the next week and a half or so. Now, we're not going to be putting these episodes in the Everything feed. If you want to listen to this podcast, you got to open up your podcast app. You got to search Unchained Binge or Escape Unchained. Either of those things will probably pop up the right podcast and go listen on that channel. The reason for this is because we do a lot of podcasts already, and if we dump like 8 more episodes in the Everything feed between now and the start of the Tour de France, it will be chaos. So if you want to go listen to that podcast, head over to that feed, give it a listen. Go search Unchained Binge wherever you get your podcasts. Check that one out. We really enjoy making them. We're a couple episodes in already. The show is fun and mostly accurate, and it's certainly entertaining, and more importantly, it gets us all stoked for the Tour de France, which is exactly what we want this time of year. So go check it out, Unchained Binge Pod, wherever you get your podcasts. Let's take a quick break, and when we come back, we have a Tour de France mailbag. All right, welcome back, everybody. We're going to get into a little Tour de France mailbag. So what we did here is we dropped a quick note into the Escape Collective member Discord, asked for some questions based off what our members have seen at the Dauphiné and Tour de Suisse and all the rest. It's going to be Tour de France related. Of course, if you want to be included in future mailbags, you just need to become a member. We're going to do a couple of these throughout the Tour de France. There'll be other ways to get in touch, but beyond just Discord if you're not into Discord. But yeah. You have to be a member, or else we probably won't answer your question. We might. If it's really good, we might answer your question. But let's be honest, we're probably going to answer member questions first. We might not out of spite. Yeah. All right, so Jonny, what is you have the list of questions over there. What's first?
Our first question comes from Richard, who, if anyone knows the answer to this, I think there's a British billionaire living in Monaco who would pay you a lot of money for the answer to this question. Which is, what is Ineos's plan? They're going to the Tour with 4 or possibly 5 leaders between Egan Bernal, Carlos Rodriguez, Thomas Pidcock, Geraint Thomas. They've snuck Laurens de Plus in there. Maybe Richard's Belgian. But is that a quintet of leaders? What do we think? Quartet of leaders? What's the plan? Is it Carlos Rodriguez all in?
Well, Bernal said at the beginning of the Tour de Suisse it may not even go to the Tour.
Yeah, I think
he'll go to the Tour. Come on, he's ridden pretty well.
I'm just telling you the facts. I'm just telling you what happened.
You can't believe these.
I agree. I think he'll be there. Yeah,
I do appreciate that level of humility versus the exact opposite from Tom Pidcock,
Right.
where the quotes popped up from, I think it was Ian Parker over at PA that chatted with Pidcock, and Ian always does a great job, and friend of the pod, and the response from Pidcock was, "I'm going to set my own goals," because what was the exact quote? Do either of you have it in front of you?
I had it up.
He said that nobody else will. I think that was the top line. Was like,
nobody else is going to tell me what I'm going to do at the Tour.
Yeah.
I don't know. I kind of respect.
Shall I find the quote?
I kind of respect it, and I kind of respect the fact that, if he understands the way his own motivation works, et cetera, but it's also like, you are a professional bike racer. You are paid to do a job, and the job may or may not include you doing whatever the hell you want for 3 weeks at the Tour de France. And it's actually not up to you, right? Like he's not, he's won a lot, right? But he's not Van der Poel or Van Aert or Vingegaard or Pogacar, right? He's not.
The thing is he hasn't won a lot. He's won 5 races on the road.
Amount.
Yeah, but he's an Olympic mountain
bike.
But
he's not won a GC
span of
anything.
First of all, we are not answering Richard's question right now. we got on a Pidcock tangent. I think there's more Pidcock coming later, maybe. So let's answer the question.
Can I answer the question, even though I asked it? Is that rude?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to.
I think that's okay.
Well, you didn't ask it. Richard did. Crack on.
Richard asked it. Yeah. Okay, I relayed it. My answer would be they're really hoping that Carlos Rodriguez can get in the top 5. They're really hoping that. They need a new GC guy. They spent money on him to make sure he didn't go to Movistar. They hope Thomas Pidcock wins like a good stage, and he feels like he doesn't have to go off to Red Bull Bora Hansgrohe, because they kind of need him. I think they're about to lose Geraint Thomas soon to age or injury or retirement. Not injury. Not injury. So their plan is, I think, to cross their fingers and hope that Jim Ratcliffe is still preoccupied with who's going to be Man United manager, before they can just like figure out a decent showing at the Tour. But it's hard because staff keeps leaving, riders keep leaving, and it doesn't exactly fill you with confidence. Like if you compare the Ineos that Tom Pidcock joined at the start of his road career and the Ineos that there is now, I mean, who does tell him what to do within that team? Who within that team, apart from Geraint Thomas, who's probably can't be bothered, can turn around and be like, "No, Tom, this is." Like, who else there has won like Amstel Gold, Olympic gold medals, Tour stage on Alpe d'Huez? That's, I imagine, where Pidcock's frustration is coming from.
But unless he wins Tour de Suisse, based on form and whichever definition you take, Rodriguez has got the pole position. He's won the Tour de Romandie. Yeah. He's won 3 mountain stages this year. He has taken another step up. So he looks like a GC guy. So I mean, to answer Richard's question, I mean, I don't think anyone's expecting Thomas. I don't think Thomas is expecting to necessarily be the leader. He may well be on cracking form. We don't know. But I think Bernal, he's going to be protected. But I think Pidcock's best bet is going to be second, co-leader to Rodriguez, but Rodriguez is going to be that guy. I mean, logically, he's got to be.
Rodriguez is also 100% less British than Tom Pidcock. But I guess, I don't know. I don't know if you guys could tell based off the accent, but I'm not British as well. And so I don't really care whether Ineos successfully, sort of builds up the next generation of great British riders. But that was sort of the original goal. And I think that gave the team like sort of its reason to be, right? Like its purpose was, we're going to go find the riders that we think have the watts to win the Tour, and we're going to turn them into Tour de France champions, right? We're going to do it with Wiggins, and we're going to do it with Froome, and then we're going to do it with Thomas. I mean, they made 3 Tour de France champions, right? That is massively, massively impressive. And I feel like the team returning
now.
Well, I feel like the team returning to that as a goal would maybe help some of this listlessness, right? It's like,
it's a good word.
Okay,
for it, yeah.
Like we've got Bernal, but Bernal ran into a bus. That's very unfortunate. we've got Carlos Rodriguez. He's very good. He's pretty young, but he's not that much younger than Tadej Pogačar. So is he ever going to beat Tadej Pogačar? Big question mark there, right? I feel like the team returning to we're going to turn Tom Pidcock into a GC rider, into a tour champion as a purpose would be good for the team. Now, the problem with that is I don't think Tom Pidcock wants to do that. So that is the sort of underlying issue with that particular theory. But I do feel like that they're missing not an opportunity, but they're, like I said, listless. Like it doesn't feel like the team has a purpose. Like they don't know what the end goal is. They don't have a 2-year plan or a 3-year plan or a 5-year plan anymore. And they always felt like they did before. And I think that's Pidcock feels like the person that you could get the British public to rally around, blah 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 blah, to like build that team back up again. Blah 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 blah. I mean, then I'd have to live through it again, and it was not enjoyable the first time. But I would do that for my British friends over there. Jonny, I think that follow-up question. There's a follow-up question from Detective.
Okay,
it's actually down a couple on your list that I think is related because it actually gets to the multiple leaders question once again.
Right, yeah. Here comes a question from Detective. Fun username. They write, spin-off question. Are fans and media too hard on teams that have multiple leaders when none of those leaders happen to be the strongest rider in the race? It seems to me like multiple leaders great when you happen to have the strongest riders in the race, like Sky or Ineos 2018, 2019, but works poorly when the team doesn't, in brackets, Movistar for all eternity. When was the last Grand Tour when a rider won, finishing ahead of a clearly stronger rider from a different team as a result of team tactics? That was a hard bit to say at the end. So the question here is basically, is it an exercise competition or is it a real sport? So maybe for all of our sakes, you guys can provide an answer where it's both.
Interesting caveat. I saw that question appear on it was Discord, right?
Yeah.
And somebody gave a great answer. Again, I haven't got Discord open, or my laptop will fly away. But somebody said, it really depends on how the other teams perceive you. Because if you're, I don't know, I can't remember this actually happening, but say you're Movistar and you've got the Trident and somebody goes up the road, but they're not considered a real threat by the other teams, then you haven't got multiple leaders. You've just got this kind of aura or one guy that is a potential winner of stages. I mean, the obvious example, although it's not an example to this question, is the stage 11 in 2022 when Roglic had already lost time, but he was used as this pawn for Vingegaard. But again, I think we eventually found that actually Vingegaard was probably the better exerciser in that scenario anyway. He was probably the stronger guy compared to Pogačar, except that Pogačar did have to do an awful lot of work on his own because he was chasing down Roglic and Vingegaard, and Roglic was still perceived a threat despite having lost a lot of time.
I mean, okay, last year we had Pogačar where he came in with his injury, so he was undercooked. But there's an argument to be made that both times Vingegaard and Jumbo-Visma followed a plan of how to beat Pogačar, like ride really hard, wear him out, and make it an exercise competition rather than a bike race. Because I think Vingegaard is probably better at exercise than Pogačar, but Pogačar's better at bike races. It is the case that the strongest rider wins, right? Nearly 90% of the time, as long as they stay out.
And last year, Jumbo-Visma didn't come in with two leaders, but UAE did. They had Adam Yates, and they ended up second and third, didn't they? So, what?
Nah, that was all lies. That was all lies.
I don't. Well, I mean, okay. Even if it was all lies, which I'm not sure I believe, they did end up second and third, and Adam Yates was protected. And but yeah, I mean that scenario sort of, I don't know, maybe could be a counter argument. No, an argument for the multiple leaders not really being a thing. Maybe it's literally just a logistical reasoning where, it's too much risk to only take one guy, so you've got to take two. So you're going to tell everyone and just have that kind of niggling idea of maybe you've got more than one person to watch. But actually, when it comes down to it, it's mano a mano.
I mean, I think that the sort of the question that this brings up for me is sort of what's better. Like if you have a couple riders who are all, could be somewhere in the top 10, but are not probably the strongest rider in the race. If that's all you got, like, what are your options? Your options are to ride like your rider is the favorite, right? So then you do the whole, line the thing out on the final climb, do the mountain lead out thing, and then your leader gets dropped anyway. Like there are few things more embarrassing in pro bike racing than that, right? Where you've got 6 dudes all working their butts off for you. You're the last one, and then it's you and Pogacar and Vingegaard, and they just drop you anyway, right? Like that just looks totally futile and ridiculous, and you're kind of playing into their hands. And so I feel like, we make fun of the Movistar Trident, and we make fun of the sort of the multi-leader thing, but like, what else are you going to do if that's what you've got from a talent perspective? Like what there are no other options, and chaos is probably your friend in that case. And what I think is that like, I wish that teams like that would be willing to, this is my issue with the Trident, is when you try to stack 3rd to 7th, right? 3rd to 6th, as opposed to like shoot for winning. And then, maybe one or two of you guys end up 17th, right? Like that would be, it's a big, bold thing to do. And it's hard to do at the Tour de France, where you've got sponsor obligations and where a top 10 is a massive, massive thing. But like the Trident falls down with conservative riding, basically. But I also don't really see any other option for teams in that position.
Yeah, it's hard. I mean, it happens in sprints sometimes too, and it's more explicit maybe if you've got 2 riders on the same team coming 2nd and 3rd or 3rd and 4th. It's like something went wrong there, and that's most obvious. But yeah, I mean, when you're racing for 3 weeks and there's one guy or 2 guys who are just so far better than everybody else, then like you say, Caley, what can you do but just try and, I don't know, win the team's classification, get your big old M flashed around the world on TV screens all the time. So it's hiding to nothing. And then the sponsorship question is a good one too, because, and also bloody UTI points. It's something that unfortunately comes into tactics because it's necessary for the survival of the sport and for teams within it.
Yep.
One more question. Let's do one more.
Yep. This one is from Tyler Bronder. The question is, what non-race polemica will consume far too much pod time this tour, in brackets, wrong answers only? I'm just going to...
I have a right answer.
Your right answer, okay. I'm just going to Google what polemica means quickly while you answer.
So, it's basically just something that you talk about, and you put massive amount of
controversy
emphasis on when it's kind of
translated it from Spanish, I think.
Yeah. But it's like a controversy that's been overblown a little bit.
Well, polemica in cycling would be doping. It's the eternal polemica of cycling is doping.
I see.
Yeah, but also polemicas. We make polemicas out of things in cycling all the time.
Yeah.
So outside of cycling, I feel like the non-race polemica that will consume far too much of our time is going to be the fact that Macron just called an election in France. So I think for the first round is going to be while we're still in Italy, which is great. But the second round and the 7th is when we're going to be up in Dijon.
It's the gravel stage.
That'll be
at least
good.
It's the gravel stage, so it's not like they're using roads that people would be using to get to the polling stations.
The polls. Yeah, I mean, honestly,
obviously it's not all gravel, but
I don't think I've ever been in France for an election. I'm trying to remember. I mean, there must have been one or two while we lived there, but I don't really remember it being an issue in my life. Whereas, like, does the country shut down? Like, are we going to be able to have a stage race that day? Like, I don't really know what the answer to that
was.
Was
it Paris-Roubaix that was moved, or is it some big classic? Was moved?
And that was just for local elections.
Yeah, but it was because people needed to be able to easily access the polls.
Right.
And if roads are closed and there's confusion about that, or there are people cramming the roads, or people wanting to go and see the race. I think that's the issue.
So
I think that stage is the 7th. So
it's a Sunday.
They could switch. They could switch the rest
day. They've already said they've said it's all going to be fine. They're gonna basically what they're going to do is make more like passing points, because usually like the route's quite locked down when you're like going through town. So they're just going to make way more passing points, and I think have like volunteers on them and like signposts. That's going to be and then we've got a British election as well, which is obviously less important to the actual tour, but that's on the 4th of July. We've got the Euros on, so it's just there's too much going on. My other answer to the non-race polemica is I think we're going to go down the rabbit hole of watching David Gaudu snogging his girlfriend all the time, because now we're going to be looking out for it. And he was undercooked in the Dauphiné, so I don't know where I was going with that. Somewhere weird.
He snogs regardless. Like good day, bad day.
He leaves it on the
snogging
bike.
happens. So it doesn't really matter.
I see.
Yeah, his form is irrelevant to the snogging in general.
Wasn't there one moment where Ian spotted him and his girlfriend like wearing one t-shirt together or something? Just absolutely barbaric behaviour for a very international bike race with lots of members of the public around.
I mean, we're going to be talking a lot about Cav.
Oh
Yeah.
God.
But that's race polemica. That's
Yeah.
race polemica. Tyler's question
True.
was non-race polemica.
Oh,
concern.
okay.
I mean, we just don't know, right? Like, you know, it's gonna be well, Jonny, you and I for the first week, and then Ian shows up, and then Ronan at the very end. And
Yeah.
you know, frankly, until Ian is there and you two get together, we don't know what's going to consume our time. But something will consume our time
Something.
for sure.
And we've got
Something.
Josh Robinson turn up later as well, don't we? So it's real. We're
We do.
like sandbagging. We're like doing like trying to get through the first couple weeks, spending no energy, and
Yep.
then third week is when we go and try and win a stage.
Oh yeah.
Hopefully,
Well, thank you to Richard, Tyler,
Detective.
and Detective for your
Quite the
questions
trio.
on Discord. We will do some more. Yeah, we'll do some more mailbags. I probably, I don't know, maybe the rest day we'll do mailbags. We haven't really decided what those rest day episodes. So the rest day episodes during this tour, we're going to do tour dailies, right? In fact, the name of the channel you're probably listening to this on is going to be called the Tour Daily for the month. You can still search Escape Collective or whatever, but you know, the logo changes. We run them every single day, but those rest day episodes are going to be members only. So you can only get those if you've got the membership feed, which means you need to go get the membership feed at escapecollective.com/member. Figure that out. If you're already a member, just Google search Escape Collective members only feed and it'll take you to the page. You can only open that page if you're signed in. Otherwise, it'll just boot you right back onto the homepage. Anyway, thanks to all of you for those questions. That is it for us today. We are going to do a bit of Escape After Dark today. We're going to do a bit of transfer talk. We've got news from Ineos, and specifically an Ineos women's team that is not going to be happening. Pauline Ferrand-Prévot been linked to Visma Lisa bike. We've got some other transfer stuff around O'Connor and Yates, which I, after watching the second episode of Netflix Unchained show, Ben O'Connor, get the hell out of there, man. All right, we're gonna drop that into After Dark. If you are a member, stick around. If you are not, what are you doing with your life? We'll see you next week. Bye-bye.